So this video is just going to be a quick comparison of the Caran d'Ache 849 rollerball, the Parker Jotter XL, the Caran d'Ache 849 ballpoint, and the standard Parker Jotter. Basically what happened was the Jotter and the 849 are iconic ballpoint pens, fairly similar. They have long pasts. They're kind of a storied pen. They've been made in many different versions. So they have this sort of background that's very similar, but also they're similar pens. They're retractable. They are both on the small side. They're actually right around the same size. They're narrower pens. They don't have grips. There's a lot that's similar about these pens. So when Parker came out with the Jotter XL a couple years ago, I think in 2018, maybe early 2019, it was pretty interesting because this is a larger version of the Jotter. Sells for about twice as much. So maybe a Jotter is on retail like, I don't know, $12 or $15, but you could find it for less. The Jotter XL is about $30. And the Jotter XL is said to be, I think, 7% larger in volume, so overall, but it seems like a much larger pen. So it's pretty interesting offering. The 849 was always available as this ballpoint, and then earlier this year, a couple months ago, I think in September 2021, Caran d'Ache released the 849 rollerball. And all the rollerball is really an 849 XL. That would have been a more accurate name to me, because most rollerballs are capped. This one is also retractable, just like the original. The refills are essentially the same as well. It doesn't use a dedicated rollerball refill. It uses a Parker style refill, which is almost what's used in the 849, but we'll get into that later. I believe the delta here is 28%, although it's not really clear if the two companies are measuring in the same way, if it's a volume change or what. But you could see the rollerball is a much larger pen. Here is the 849 and the Jotter, again, about the same length, about the same width. These little hashes are 1/2 inch markers, so this pen is 5 inches long, just about. Now we will put down the 849 rollerball and the Parker Jotter XL, and you can see they really line up almost exactly, which is probably not a coincidence. I don't know what was happening within Caran d'Ache, but it seems like at least a possibility they would have seen the Jotter XL come out and be it seems fairly successful. It's hard to say, but definitely fairly well received by people that are looking for a larger Jotter. And how do you stay true to the original while giving something a slightly larger pen? The is a little bit shorter, the rollerball, but they're right about 5.5 inches long. The Jotter XL is just a hair longer. The bodies are really similar. This one has a kind of really drastic taper, and then it squares off. Let's get the exact difference in size. So I'm squaring up the bottoms, and you could see that's the difference in height. So maybe 2 or 3 millimeters. Now I will line up the buttons, and you'll see the Jotter XL is, again, just 3 or so millimeters longer. And then we'll line them up, and you can see the difference in the tapers. This one has a more extended taper. This one stops right here. The 849 rollerball is definitely a little bit wider than the Jotter on the whole. And we're looking at, you want to look at this rollerball at the widest point. So basically on the diagonal here, like basically with it angled as opposed to it being flat. The buttons are rather different. Caran d'Ache uses a big, quiet button. Jotter uses a small, loud button. The clip on the 849 is, I think, a lot nicer than the Jotter clip. It's also removable, or you could rotate it, so that's interesting. I said I would talk briefly about the refill. The Jotter uses a Parker style or G2 refill. The Caran d'Ache uses the same Parker style or G2 refill. You know, Caran d'Ache has the more complex mechanism. It builds everything into this kind of button here, whereas all that stuff is hidden here, but it's fairly simple. You can't really do anything with this mechanism if it gets clogged or dirty, whereas pretty much everything is exposed in the Caran d'Ache. The standard Parker jotter uses that same refill as the larger version, just a G2 refill, whereas the Caran d'Ache 849 uses a smaller refill. You could see that here I used a G2 refill, a standard G2 refill, but I had to cut it down a little bit in order to get into the custom size that Caran d'Ache uses. The difference is really small, just a couple millimeters, but it prefers to have a flat end here, and then again, it has to be a little bit shorter. If you're looking for a Parker style or G2 pen in a larger size, you have the Jotter and the Jotter XL, and you have the 849 rollerball. Those are two viable options. If you want something smaller, you have many options. The Jotter and the 849 remain fairly standard picks, as long as you understand the 849 has a caveat and the refill will need to be customized a little bit. If you're choosing between the Jotter XL and the 849 rollerball, you have to understand these are fairly expensive pens, at least in the scheme of like what they are. They're not luxury pens, or not luxury in the way of a very high-end pen. It's essentially a daily use pen like an 849 or a Jotter, but instead of paying $10 or $12 for the entry-level one, you're paying something like $30 for the XL, or almost $50 in the case of this rollerball. So it's a big step up. These prices on the XL has dropped a little bit. So instead of being like $35, you could buy it now for maybe like $28. These ones, because the pen is so new, it's selling pretty standard at $48, $47, $48 around there. And maybe next year we'll see prices drop. Okay, so when choosing between the pens, I would say between the two smaller pens, I would take the Jotter over the 849. They're both a little small, but I am a Jotter fan. I like this one. 849, of course, is very cool, but it's probably a better looking pen, but I prefer writing with the Jotter, and I prefer that it uses that standard refill. I don't have to hack up my refill or use that Goliath refill, which is fine, but not my favorite. Between the Jotter XL and the rollerball, I think the rollerball is overpriced, but for me, it's more comfortable to hold than the Jotter XL. This is a pen I've had for over 2 years now, and I've never really grown to love this shape. I think it's fine. It's like not too big or anything like that, and it's comfortable enough. Just not really my favorite pen to use. I just never have grown very fond of it. Whereas I do think the rollerball, the 849 rollerball, even though it is overpriced, it's still an interesting pen, and I still find it to be fun to use. I guess we'll see what I think about it in 2 or 3 years, but so far so good on this one, and independent of the price, I do like using it, and I prefer it to the Jotter XL. So I'll just put in some quick writing samples at the end. Not all these pens have the original refills in it, but you can at least see them in action. So we have the Caran d'Ache 849 rollerball. This is with the original refill in it. This is a Parker G2 style refill, but it uses I believe it's a gel refill. So this is the Caran d'Ache 849 RB. Now we have the Caran d'Ache 849 ballpoint. This, I think I have I forget what I have. I have anyway, it's a needle tip refill in there. I think it's a Odo, from the Odo Rays. So this is the Caran d'Ache ballpoint. Now we have a Parker Jotter, and I just have this old refill in it. This is just a super old Jotter refill from back in the day, one of Parker's ballpoint refills. See if it still works. Yeah, this is probably a 30-plus-year-old refill. Still works. It's nice to see. This refill has seen better days, but there you go, it's warming up. And now you can see that XL in action. This is with the original Jotter XL refill. This is a Parker Jotter XL. Very standard Parker ballpoint refill. So there's that gel type refill in the Caran d'Ache. Just my needle tip ballpoint refill. Again, anything, a lot of different refills will fit in this one, but it accepts, it's tricky about what refills it'll take. So I have that Oto in there. Not every G2 refill will fit in there, but most will if you kind of hack them up a little bit. And then we have that old school Jotter, just a standard ballpoint refill. And then the Jotter XL, which is a newer style ballpoint refill. You know, still oil-based ink, but again, it's probably 20 or 30 years newer than the refill in this one. So that covers it